Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. This is episode 125 for us as well. So I guess 100 and a quarter, if you want to look at it like that there. I think somebody checked my math on that there. But fun stuff here and that we've been covering on the Fiscal Physical Podcast. And I couldn't do this without Ryan, or I couldn't do it nearly as well, I suppose, without Ryan Nelson here. Ryan, how are you doing today, my man?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. I can't wait to dive into this week's topic, and hopefully all the listeners out there are on the edge of their seats as they always are during these intros to see what we're going to cover today. So let's dive into it. You ready?
Let's do it.
Awesome. So recently, Ryan, I was driving back from the Bay Area with my wife, and there was a big billboard. And sometimes you're driving and you just peek at the billboards and you just kind of move along. You're like, law office, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's something. But this one was it said tear down the paper ceiling. Mm-hmm. And my wife commented on it when she saw it, and she was like, "Oh, that's awesome that they're promoting that." And I was like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what a paper ceiling is. That doesn't seem like a very good investment if that's your ceiling kind of thing here. So she kind of tried to explain what it was there, but I was hoping you could give a breakdown of what that actually means, how it applies, it affects certain individuals, and maybe how it applies or compares to a glass ceiling, because I've heard glass ceiling before, but specifically with higher education degrees and labor market. I'm curious. I did a little bit of research on it, but got a little more confused than maybe I'd like to admit. So hopefully you can break this down, Ryan. Best structure, how this kind of looks and what it impacts and kind of what goes into a paper ceiling, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. So I don't know that I'm the by any means an expert on the topic or anything, or the most well suited to chat about it, but happy to give my 2 cents and my opinion of what it is. When people are talking about a paper ceiling, I believe what they're talking about is the sort of that invisible barrier that blocks qualified and capable workers from getting hired to a role that they are qualified and capable of doing because they don't have a degree. So they have the skills to do the job, but they're not getting looked at or considered to do the job or hired to do the job because they don't have that degree. So they call it obviously a paper ceiling because it's quite literally that piece of paper, your degree, not your talent or your work ethic or your results or any of that. Mm-hmm. It's the actual degree itself that's keeping you from being able to be considered for this job.
I'm not going to lie. Maybe I should have done a little bit more research. I didn't even put the 2 and 2 together. That's a paper, a degree paper.
Really? Yeah,
oh my gosh, this makes so much more sense that's why it's called a paper ceiling, I suppose. So cool. Awesome. Good stuff. Maybe I'll edit that out because that doesn't make me sound very good. So, but I won't. Anyway, sorry, continue.
So in the real world, basically, so somebody could maybe go, learn through work experience, maybe through the military or get some certification or an apprenticeship, right? And might have years of doing a job, but then they go apply for another job and they're just screened out before they even get a fair shot, right? Mm-hmm. And, I think some of the underlying issues here, surround the demographics of who, culturally, the demographics of who has degrees and who doesn't. This disproportionately sort of screens out certain demographics of people more often than some other demographics. Sure. So more affluent people tend to have, more affluent people's kids tend to get degrees at a faster rate than less affluent groups. Mm-hmm. So then the less affluent might be qualified, but then not getting chances at getting these jobs because they don't have the degree. So I think that's kind of where the real sticking point here is, if you will. But the big part of the big problem here is that it happens before the interview even starts. So again, like the qualified individual isn't even getting a chance or a crack at the interview and proving themselves. It's just getting filtered out. So you can imagine a business, if I open up a position and I get 100 applicants, I'm looking for, so if I'm going to hire somebody at Alchemy and I get 100 applicants for this position, it may not be practical for me to do 100 interviews. So I want some way of identifying, like, maybe I have the capacity to do 20 interviews. Well, how do I go from 100 resumes to 20 interviews? And so one theoretical way might be I say, well, there's 25 people with degrees. Let's filter out the 75 without degrees. And then, okay, I have these 25 with degrees. Which of the 20 are, maybe I do another set of filtering. Hey, and then at least we have 20 people to interview. So ultimately, like from a practical standpoint, I think that's like how this has come to be, right? But it has some negative implications, potentially culturally. And you can imagine if Alchemy used that hiring, sort of that process, is it quite possible that the best person for the job was one of those 75 that I filtered out? Quite possible. So now I'm getting less quality, right? Like maybe I missed out on getting the best candidate, and the best candidate missed out on the job.
Sure.
It's not great for either of us, right?
It's a lose-lose in that
right.
regard,
So we can see how it's not great for the candidate, this, me applying this filtering, or, in that sense, me applying this paper ceiling. It wasn't great for me. It wasn't great for the candidate that missed out on the job. So it's, like you said, it's a lose-lose. But you can also put yourself in the other shoes of like, hey, there's this company that has the capacity to interview 20 people. How do they get from 100 resumes to 20 people? They have to filter somehow, right? So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy there. But you did mention the glass ceiling. So maybe worth sort of the comparison here. So I think glass ceilings, if I'm culturally up to date on it, the glass ceiling is usually about filtering out qualified people, or like qualified individuals, again, being blocked from advancing to certain jobs because of a bias geared towards women or race. And so I think oftentimes we'd say certain races that this glass ceiling applies to, or certain genders, typically females, this glass ceiling would apply to. And so the paper ceiling is effectively that same exact dynamic, but instead of people being blocked from progressing to roles that they're qualified for, instead of them being blocked by race or gender, it's the lack of this like formal degree, having the degree. So they're very, very similar, hence why glass ceiling, paper ceiling, right? That's kind of a play on words. But it's sort of this, it's a different metric that's the limiting factor here, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely does. And that's a solid breakdown kind of what those are. And I think you mentioned maybe we're not the most qualified to talk on these topics, but I mean, I think it's important to kind of know what they are and kind of be able to think about them and at least understand okay, cool. This is how it can affect certain individuals, or this is how. I think you made a really good point of how do you filter down? If you're a company, do you look at oh, cool, I'm actually going to change that to be work experience instead. Do you have X number of years working in the industry? Awesome. You don't have a degree, doesn't matter. You have this, but where you draw the line, I suppose, with which job, which certifications and such.
And I don't know that I have any single. I certainly know that actually I don't have any answers to this. And
sometimes it's better to be certain about that.
And there's positive and negative implications to all that, right? So again, if you were even to say, hey, we need we're going to filter, we need you to have 10 years of work experience. Well, then there's now a new, whatever you want to call it, a new ceiling being placed on the young generation. So now the people who are just graduating college, they may be brilliant, they may be super capable of doing the job, but they're not getting a crack at it because they don't have the years of experience. How do they get the years of it? I know there is, kind of an old joke where it's every single these entry level jobs require 5 years of experience. It's well, how do you get the only way to get, you need the entry level job to get the experience. So you can imagine sort of any filter you apply by filtering out some group of people, you're now limiting, there's some limiting factor there. So I certainly don't propose to have any solutions to this. Sure. But what's one thing I find interesting is there's this idea called degree inflation. And it was this sort of culturally, like we've gone through this element of degree inflation where I think we've started like culturally like really valuing college degrees, right? And employers then started requiring these then as more people get degrees, it's more of table stakes. And then, it's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy. And so now employers start requiring these bachelor degrees that in the past, 20 years ago, you didn't need a bachelor's degree to do. And therefore, you really don't need the bachelor's degree to do the work. But now the employer is requiring the bachelor's degree. So yeah, it's kind of this degree inflation, we've sort of inflated the value of these degrees, which I think has kind of culminated in this. It's resulted in what we're talking about today.
Yeah, no, I think that's a solid. I always think of you can kind of think of life or whatever. It's almost like a pendulum, like things swing back and forth. Like, oh my gosh, like we're putting all this value in. Like, you think about 40, 50 years ago, it was like, hey, do you have the experience in this? That's probably more of what's looked at versus maybe now, and maybe we're shifting back. I'm not really sure where we're at in the pendulum with this here too. But it's like, hey, you go on LinkedIn or Indeed or any of these places, and a lot of them ask for, college degree, higher degree, like preferred, plus 7 years of experience. You're like, holy smokes! Like we're getting really specific on what we can do with these here before you can even get past the entry point, if you will, to these places. So, like I said, I don't know if that's bad or good. I'm sure it depends on the industry or the job specifically, because maybe you'd want someone to have a higher degree in certain areas. But
absolutely right. I think there's a time and a place, and I think that so I mean, why this has happened, I think we kind of gave the argument for why. It's like, hey, these employers are using this, when they have these huge stacks of applications, are using this as a fast way to filter it down, right? So we can kind of understand, okay, whether you agree with it or not, you can understand how it's come to be. And again, the downside of this is you're shrinking the talent pool. So the good talent's missing out on jobs, and the jobs are missing out on good talent. So it's like, okay, that's clearly not good for the individuals, and it's also not good for the businesses. Right. So both kind of want this problem fixed, so to speak. So there are employers that are moving more towards skills-based hiring. And so it's like, okay, we don't need they'll use a questionnaire or a quiz type thing to identify who's the most qualified for these specific skills for this specific role. You can imagine that makes it at these huge organizations where they're hiring for thousands of different roles, and they have, the specific skills for each role are unique. You'd have to create a new skills-based hiring platform for each one. So you can imagine how this isn't something where as a community we can just switch over to tomorrow. Even if the businesses and the individuals want to do it, there's a lot of resources that have to flow into this to be able to create a system to be able to do this skills-based hiring. So the market, you could say, is kind of behind on it, but it is something that obviously the employer will benefit from and the individuals will benefit from. So it's I think everybody sort of wants to figure out how best to hire the best skill. But to your point, there are then there are roles where you still probably want some people getting, higher level degrees. You're going to have still your doctors and your attorneys and your CPAs and your engineers that they probably shouldn't be self-taught on YouTube. They should probably have gone through a structured education, right?
Yeah.
And I think that makes complete sense.
I think so too. We were talking earlier in one of the breaks we had. We were talking about eye surgery and such too. I probably don't want somebody giving me LASIK or putting in a permanent contact, and right before they're I just saw this on YouTube. I've really boned up on my knowledge through YouTube. Yeah. That's not really something you want to inspire confidence on versus hey, I went to school for 4 years to be this, to do this, blah, blah, whatever. But I do think there's still a time and a place for those certain ones where you don't really want to hear that. Right. Oh, I learned this on YouTube. That doesn't really inspire confidence with something. But I think about mechanical stuff and such too. With I think there's but you can changing a headlight, for a layman like myself, I can look on YouTube and figure that out. So I think that there's a time and I don't need to go to mechanic school. I don't even know if that's what it's called. It shows my ignorance there, but I do think that it's a give and a take. And like you said, it benefits the employer to find the right person for the role.
Yeah.
And if they can find that, if what that actually is and what the qualifications are, sometimes it's hard to know like what that is. So it's a difficult game, if you will. That's kind
definitely.
of what I'm kind of thinking of. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. So tough. Like I said, I don't know that we have any solutions or answers, or I don't even know that I have any strong opinions on the topic. But it is interesting, and it does seem to be like a gap in the market. And you want, you like in theory, if you believe in the invisible hand and supply and demand, you want the in theory, the best talent should be getting those jobs. And so I'm confident that like societally we'll work something out, because like we said, everybody wins when you're connecting the best people in the best roles. Like,
Absolutely. Super well said there, Ryan, for sure. So awesome. Well, hopefully you guys learned something with this, at least kind of got intrigued by this. Definitely do your own research. I'd be curious to hear, if people have been affected by this as well, too. I'm always just super fascinated by people's stories when it comes to, certain instances that have happened in your life, whether it comes from employment or otherwise. So let us know. And also let us know if you guys want to hear any other topics here. We'd love to cover them for sure. And we'll go ahead and take a quick pause here. Be back on the other side of this.
And now, to put the personal in personal finance.
Welcome back to this side of the Fiscal Physical podcast. We're on the personal side here, and it's a personal question, Ryan, but it's kind of professional, I suppose, for you. So my question to you is, what's the most rewarding business conference or just conference in general that you've ever attended? I don't know. I think you've been to a few, but I don't know. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think. I think sometimes people will go to these conferences and like want the silver bullet or something,
Sure.
and like, hey, what's the shortcut? Or like, there's a bunch of different sessions, and like it's like, oh, I need to identify like the one session that like you're looking at all the different things you could attend. It's like, oh, yeah, this, and you see something and you're like, oh man, this could solve all my problems. And I think like that's just not the way the world works, right? And so to me, the most rewarding thing, or like the biggest benefit of these business conferences, is just like the energy and the motivation,
Definitely.
and being around like-minded people. And so I find pretty much every conference I go to, my biggest takeaway is just like a renewed sense of energy and drive. And you see other people doing good, impressive things, and you get a couple good ideas, and you're like, oh yeah, like I should do that, or that's something I've been thinking about. I never knew there was a way to do that, or quite how to do that, or I just thought it would be a ton of work, but now I see somebody else doing it. I guess like, yeah, can't be that much work. I can't do it, right?
Sure.
So yeah, that's I don't know that it's to me. I don't know that a single conference stands out. They're all kind of the same, and it's just the value is being around similar like-minded people, and to me that's motivating.
Yeah.
What about you?
No, that's a super. I think you hit on all the points that I'm also going to make too. I've been to a couple of conferences. I went to one like last year on a technology to like review like calls and interactions with customers. I work in a kind of a customer service industry, and it was super cool. Like the what we learned about, like you mentioned, like I didn't learn anything groundbreaking at this thing. Like but what I did learn is like how other people use this technology, or what their focus is, or where they like put their efforts into.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting. Put their resources of like comparing, like, okay, well, we put X amount into this. You guys don't put as much into that. Where do you put that, or what happens to that, or how do you manage this day to day? Also, like week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter, and such too. So I always find that super interesting. Plus, I really enjoy the networking piece of it.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's awesome to kind of meet people. I still like. I've only been to a few of them these days, but I still like have good contacts that I built up through these. That I'm like I'll get a LinkedIn message, or like someone will send me a text or whatever, because we went out for drinks afterwards and like had a good time, and so I think that there's a lot of benefits to like meeting people with like-minded ideas, or in the same industry as you. I think it's always super fascinating to me to kind of see that. Like, so I think there's benefits. You get what you put into it, or get what you get out of it, for the lack of a better term. But I think the networking piece, and also like just learning is just fun. It's always just fun to me too. And I think you share the same way of I'm 35, but I still think I'm going to continue to. I learn every day, and I feel like that fills my cup, if you will, from doing those kind of things. So doing this podcast with you too, I feel like every time I come home, I think I've mentioned it, I'm just buzzing with energy, and my wife's like, okay, let's calm it down. I was like, did you know about the glass or the paper ceiling? She's like, yeah. I was like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. You bozo kind of thing. But I think that's the biggest takeaway I can kind of see with that when it comes to those kind of conferences too. Yeah. So I don't know, some advice out there for the listeners, or a suggestion, I'd say, if you have the opportunity to go to something like that, maybe check it out. It might be for you, might not be for you, but I think the more knowledge you can gain, I don't think there's ever been a bad thing about learning too much.
Right.
It probably is, but I don't know. Yeah. But awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it, Ryan. Appreciate all the listeners out there. And anything left here, Ryan, before we wrap up?
As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening. And as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode. And consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.